you can bring up my PowerPoint. Well, thank you, Karin, for that reading. That sets the stage for my morning homily, Creation Process Theology. And I also want to thank Peggy Dixon for reading On the Day You Were Born. It gives the cosmic perspective of our Earth, which was came into being, was created 4.5 billion years ago. You mentioned the importance of the atmosphere that nurtures us, and you can see that in this view of the Earth as viewed from the barren sun, and it's the atmosphere that makes life possible on Earth. Creation theology envisions our beautiful island home in the darkness of space, created by a divine power. Next slide. My book, Containing Climate Change to Save Us, tells how creation theology, new technology, and enabling economics can save our ecology. Next. The photograph on the cover here is an enlargement of this photograph to the right here, and it's a local photograph that many of you probably have traveled from southern St. Petersburg on the process of getting to the, you see the Skyway Bridge here, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge? Well, Ginny and I were traveling that way after taking, hearing a talk at Ecology College, and we noticed this plume of smoke, and so I stopped to take this picture, which is actually quite illustrative to what goes on when we burn fossil fuels. This is similar to what might come from a coal-burning plant, but it turned out, we found out in the paper that there was a burning tire dump. And to understand this black smoke, we realized that when we burn fossil fuels, the process gives off water, carbon dioxide, which we can't see, and in this case, black soot particles. And as the hot air and carbon particles rise, the atmosphere is colder at higher temperatures, so the water is cool and it condenses on the smoke particles, and that's how clouds form, and that's what we're illustrating here. You see the enlargement on the cover of my book. Next. A chapter in my book is called Climate Prophecy versus Prophet by the philosophic theologian Paul Tillich. This is very important to me when I was a student, a graduate student at MIT. He's a philosophic theologian at Harvard University. He was a university professor, and his sermons were, I think, very important for maintaining my faith journey as a Methodist minister's son. Who loved science, when I first arrived at MIT as a freshman, I had the cultural shock of finding that religion just didn't matter, and he made religion intellectually respectable for me. So that's why I have a chapter in my book called Climate Prophecy versus Prophet. And the next slide is the sermon that I based my chapter on, Man and Earth. It was prophetic. He said, we have no guarantee against man-made floods. And the next slide illustrates that. Here's a plot of the cumulative number of disasters and extreme weather events, and you can see the blue is the floods. You can see floods have been increasing rapidly along with storms. We had a relatively minor windstorm last evening, but that was minor compared to the hurricanes we've been getting. But we're also seeing the red line shows the increasing temperature extremes, and they all start right around the 1974. Next slide. Next. I have a little marker here. That's when I first became involved with my awareness was awakened by that oil is a limited resource. When I was waiting in line to fill my gas tank in 1974 during that oil shortage. Some of you people do a lot of you people remember? And people are nodding that they remember those. I was up north and it was cold winters and it was like hours to wait in line to fill my gas tank. I was painfully aware that oil is a limited resource and we need to toil against oil. Well, Paul Tillich, his prophecy was back in 1962, shown here. But as you can see, there have been dramatic increases, particularly since I got involved back in 1974, like over 50 years ago. So this is related to the increase in carbon dioxide. In the next slide, here's the release in atmospheric carbon dioxide from burning fossil raises the temperature via the greenhouse effect, and that's the blue line you can show increasing more dramatically since 1980. And we note also that from basically the century from 1880 to 1980, a relatively small increase, but since then, in the last 50 years, the increase in both temperature, which is the wavy line, and the carbon dioxide have been increasing. And last year, 2024 was the warmest year in record, with a mean temperature. This is the average. This is the increase in temperature above the mean of 1.5 degrees C. Next slide. Here's an example of carrying creation theology. It's Pope Francis says, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. Next slide. Laudato Si, if I remember correctly, is Latin for praise be, on care for our common home. And remember, I've been used the term ecology, and the Greek word ekos means home. And so here Pope Francis used the English translation, on care for our common home. He urged us to stop plundering our planet for profit, the poor suffering the most. He said, hear the cry of the poor and hear the cry of our earth. And I illustrated that cry in my slide of those increasing weather extremes. We have a moral responsibility to bequeath an inhabitable planet for the next generation. Next slide. Well, here's a photo shortly after my 1974 when I got my attention. Solar hot water heaters on the panels of my home in Bedford, Mass. I realized that solar energy is free, but my main motivation for installing these solar panels was the fact that my oldest daughters insisted every morning on shampooing their hair before going to school. I don't think Emily was old enough. Was that you, Emily? That must have been. Was it you, Emily, too? Probably, but you're two older sisters, and I told them, oily hair is healthy, and your hair might fall out but they didn't listen to their father. That was the in thing to do when you went to high school, and my oil bill was going up. Gasoline prices at the pump went from like 30 cents per gallon. Can some of us remember those good old days before the oil shortage? 30 cents per gallon in like 6 months, it got up to $1. Well, my oil bill was also skyrocketing, and I realized solar energy was free, so I installed these solar panels, and they paid for themselves in about 10 years, and after that, it's free energy. Well, in those days, solar photovoltaics for generating electricity were just too costly. But in the last year, next slide, I'll show you. These are solar photovoltaic panels installed to provide green electricity for the 275-year-old Bedford Presbyterian Church where Ginny and I were married. And the next slide shows the dedication. Reverend Dr. John Sawyer, our pastor, with the Green Team leader Brian Martell, dedicating this 126-year solar panel with some Green Team members. You can see me on the far right. This child in the foreground is Pastor John's little son, and I think it illustrates the fact that we are bequeathing, we're making our attempt to bequeath a greener planet to the next generation. And the PC USA, that's the national organization, designated our Bedford Church as a Earth Care congregation. Next. Well, my 50-year perspective is I've been telling you how caring theology and new theology enabled the construction of these panels, but of course the challenge is always economics. How to get the funds to hire a very capable contractor to save our ecology. So the next slide. it shows our Bright Hope for Tomorrow campaign. Exciting news from Bedford Presbyterian Church. Our Bright Hope Tomorrow project officially kicked off this week and is already making incredible progress. This makes a major step forward in our commitment to sustainability, stewardship, and caring for God's creation. This was part of our 255th anniversary celebration. And next slide quickly shows our goal. Next slide. Well, to raise funds in May of 2024, an anonymous donor charged the youth group to raise $10,000 and offered to match up to an additional $10,000. The youth met the challenge with a pasta dinner and auction, and the Hickory Horn Devils, a Americana bluegrass rock group or folk group with Pastor John as the lead guitar, provided the folk music. Next. And we have an auction coming up, and the youth raised money also with an auction of a number of items. And the attractive auction for me was the fact, do not miss this opportunity for a 2-hour house concert with the Hickory Horn Devils. And I made it a point to win that bid because I was going to be celebrating my 90th birthday the next year. And they kindly entertained the people at our continuing care retirement community, again with Pastor John, the lead guitar. By the way, they play one of my favorites, which is When the Saints Go Marching In. Next slide. Well, I've been talking about solar panels, and it turns out solar panels and wind are now the most economical way of generating electricity, and that's shown in this view graph here. Back in 2009, solar panels were quite costly, about 35 cents per kilowatt hour. But in the last decade or so, you can see the cost has come down dramatically, and that's why we were able to install those solar panels on our church. Along with wind, are a little bit less expensive than natural gas. But of course, by comparison, natural gas is there all the time, and sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. And that's why we need to develop storage of the solar and wind power, and also wind, geothermal, and nuclear are also available all of the time. So, and paradoxically, actually, our present administration, which is sort of negative on green wind and solar, are offering financial incentives to increase our nuclear reactor capability when they do have the advantage. It's green energy that's available all the time as opposed to intermittent wind and solar. Next. Well, my book ends with some practical suggestions. What can we do? How can we reverse global warming right now? And as I said, under process, utility scale photovoltaic panels for electricity are being installed by churches and homes across our country and around the world. But here's something that we can do starting with our next meal, and some of us are maybe already doing it. Plant-rich diets to stop methane emissions from animals. You know, animals emit methane and other greenhouse gases from both ends, their manure and also their digestive system. They can digest cellulose. In the process, they belch out greenhouse gases. So you can now buy a vegetarian or plant-based milk, almond milk. It's available. You can buy plant-based yogurt, and there are other plant-based, so it's more available, and it's something that we can all do without having to, of course, to buy panels takes time. But now you notice that non-carbon emitting electric vehicles are fairly high in the list here. I mentioned geothermal and nuclear fission is further down, but let's talk about non-carbon emitting vehicles. Let me have the next slide. Well, here's a Nissan Leaf 2023. Karin will tell you more about this, but I must say, when I first came to this fellowship back in '07, one of the people that really impressed me was a fellow electrical engineer. I think some of you remember him, Tom Stockerbrand. I think that you pronounce his name. And people are nodding their heads. And one of the things that impressed me in '07, he had installed some lead acid batteries on the truck of his car. He'd sort of refurbished his truck to make it electric. Of course, it didn't have a great range, but it really impressed me, and that was green. That was green energy. When the Nissan Leaf became available shortly after that, he told me that he had bought a Nissan Leaf for $1,000 off a 3-year late lease. He got a dramatic decrease in price after the lease. We did the same thing for Karin. She's going to tell us about it now. But it was really Tom Stockerbrand's example. You want to use my pointer?
Next slide. Yes, sure. So I recently was very lucky to get an electric car from my grandpa, and so now I'll be telling you about how it can help the environment and how it's a enjoyment in all aspects. So as you can see, they're very fun to drive because they go from 0 to 60 very quickly. And I've had many of my friends in the car, and I've been like, watch this, and we'll like stop, and then we'll floor it, and it'll go boom, and we'll go very fast. So it's very fun to drive. And it's saved me so much money because I'm 17 years old and I have a job, but I have to save for my future and college and so many expenses nowadays, and everything's very expensive. So I get 119 miles per gallon, and I just plug it in at my house every day, and it saves me so much money, and it's more than twice as efficient as a gas-powered car, and there's less maintenance. There's a tenth of the parts. Like, there's not as many things that could go wrong because it's so much simpler, and there's just the battery, and so there's no oil filter changes, and it saves a lot of money overall, and it also saves our planet. So it benefits you and the Earth and everyone else living in the Earth. And electric vehicles are doubly green, saving our planet and the green in your pocketbook. So they're very good overall in many ways. So,
thank you, Karin. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Karin. Speaking of the fast acceleration, the electric cars get low torque at low RPM, and I remember when I first got my electric vehicle, it was a Chevy Bolt, which I drive up in New Hampshire. It was 2017. And like Karin, I wanted to impress Ginny, and I floored it, and she was duly impressed. And then a few days later, it was her turn to drive, and guess what? She floored it. And what a surprise! She's such a careful, safe driver, and suddenly the Ginny becoming a hot rod, that blew my mind. So that's another way you can have fun with electric cars. The next, that's the slide I need to talk about. Well, on the vertical, we have the average cost per month of ownership, which includes the purchase price, and it's generally more than a conventional electric car. Like, for example, this Nissan Leaf. But the total cost of ownership includes the maintenance, which is less, the simpler engine, also no oil and filter change, and also the fuel costs, like the equivalent of 100 miles per gallon in terms of the energy cost. So you add those all up for monthly costs, and we notice that the Nissan Leaf is a little bit less expensive than the Honda Civic, which my daughter Emily now has. But just a little bit, but they're much less carbon dioxide emission equivalent, as shown here. So there's another advantage, that the Civic emissions are 66% lower than with a. Okay, next. So a final chapter in my book, Containing Climate Change to Save Us, chapter 16, Creation, Care, Theology, and Technology. Science, whose fossil fuel technology unintentionally caused our climate crisis. And And of course, we're all still dependent on fossil fuels. Most of us wouldn't have been here without our fossil fuel powered vehicles. But they must be combined with over the long term with creation care technology, creation care theology. Science gives us the technical know-how, and creation care theology complements with moral motivation to save our planet. Caring theology, new green theology, and enabling economics are needed to save our ecology. Final slide. Well, here's a Florida sunset over Emerson Point. Next. Creation care for ecology. Ask not what our earth can do for us. Ask what we can do for our earth. Thank you.